Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Boots on the Ground with the Janys. Now it's just the end of the Chinese New Year festivities and everybody is back to work. So are you in the mood for working? I don't know about that because the weather nowadays is pretty chilly. It makes me feel like, it's very good weather for sleeping all the time. But anyway, on today's episode, we'll be talking about one of the bigger topics of interest in real estate. If it's your first time renting in Singapore, what to expect. So we will be talking more on the process involved in renting an apartment, and this would appeal to all of you who are new in Singapore or for those Singaporeans or PRs that are looking to rent an apartment in Singapore for the first time. So alright, let's just dive into the process. So we'll be talking about the paperwork involved in renting a unit. When you have found that dream home that you think that, oh yes, I would like to stay in this apartment, and you have done the process of negotiating the price as well as the terms and conditions for the apartment, what is next? So the representative from the landlord or the agent representing the landlord will actually issue what we call the letter of offer or the letter of intent. Now in this letter, it will actually list out all the terms and conditions that you have actually requested and the landlord has accepted for the unit that you're looking at. So typically during this process, you would also give the good faith deposit that would be equivalent to 1 month of rent, and that will be deposited into the landlord's account for his keeping while he decides whether or not he wants you as a tenant. If he doesn't want, then he will just refund you the amount. And during this process, as a way of safeguarding yourself or as a due diligence on your part, what you can do is you can actually get the property ownership on InList to check if the landlord is actually the registered owner of the property. So if I'm not wrong, it costs about $5.25 for that particular ownership report, and it's available to public. And of course, if you do have an agent representing you, an added step would be that the agent can actually go through and check for bankruptcy on the owner. So that's another added step to make sure that you are in safe hands when you are renting this apartment. And of course, if you do happen to have a landlord that is a company, make sure to check if it's GST registered, because if they are, then your rental component would have within the monthly rent that you're paying, there will be a GST component involved as well. So after this step where you have your letter of intent signed and you are moving on to the next step, this is where the landlord will actually, or the landlord's representative will actually issue out the draft tenancy agreement for you to vet through. Now, if you are interested to know how a tenancy agreement report looks like, you could actually head down or check online at the CEA website where you have go to the page where they have checklists, and you can actually go through and see that over on this checklist you do have one checklist and templates on the website, and you do have one where you can scroll down to the bottom and you can find a template for the tenancy agreements for both HDBs as well as private. So you can go through and take a look at how a standard agreement looks like. But do take note that some landlords, and especially company landlords, they do have their own tenancy agreement, and usually especially for companies, they may not, it's not really up for much debate, meaning you have to go through you have to use their template. And in that case, what you can do is you just make sure that the important clauses will be the same as it is in the template as well. Of course, when you are in doubt, please seek legal advice at this stage of the process. But also, if you would like to know what I think are some of the more popular or important clauses that you should look out for in the tenancy agreement, there will definitely be some of these, such as the minor repair clause, because that will actually list out the amount you have to pay in terms of anything breaking down in the house. And of course, the diplomatic clause, if you require one as a foreigner, and if there is a break lease clause involved, or also if you have an option to renew, as well as the aircon maintenance, because in some contracts it's under the landlord, but mostly it's under the tenant. And of course, whether if a sale of the property actually impacts you as a tenant. So that you should look out sale with tenancy. So some of the tenancy agreements provide that if they were to sell the apartment, your tenancy is not affected. You can stay in the apartment, whereas some of them, they will be selling without tenancy, so you would have to move out of the apartment. Of course, they will have to give you at least 2 or 3 months notice before this happens. So, okay, after this, at this stage, if you have any questions or when you're in doubt, you may seek legal advice. Now, while we are going through this process, in the midst of signing the agreement, at this point, the landlord or the representative will also ask for you to provide identification, meaning if you are a foreigner, they will ask for your passport or your work permit. If you are local, they will ask for your IC. Now, this is because they have to do verification on your identity to make sure that you are who you say you are, as well as they would have to go through to check online if on the valid Ministry of Manpower, as well as to check if you are actually a valid person to work in Singapore. And for that, they would have to actually take a look at your passes, and you would have to sign this checklist called the checklist for the immigration and as well as the Women's Charter. So you would have to sign this. I call it Annex A because that's what it's called at the top. So that would also be one of the documents that you would have to sign as a tenant. If you would like to see how the checklist looks like, you can also download that from the CA website. So after that, then what happens next is you would sign the tenancy, assuming everything is okay. You and the landlord agree on all the terms and conditions listed in the tenancy agreement. Both parties will have to sign, and both parties would have to have a witness to see them sign and sign beside as a witness. So after that is done, you would have to pay what we call the first month's rent, as well as the second half or half of the security deposit, because the good faith deposit would have already made up the other half of the security deposit. So in general, if for a 2-year lease, you would have paid up 3 months worth of rent to the landlord before your lease commences. Now after this, the last thing that you would have to pay for in this process is actually the stamp duty. Now this goes to IRAS. So the stamp duty is actually an easy way of remembering how to calculate would be actually, if it's not a staggered rent, meaning it's just a generic rent, like it's a fixed rent for the entire term, it's 0.4% of the total amount of rental paid for the period of the lease. So that amount goes to IRAS. If you hire an agent, usually they will actually help you do it, and then you just have to pay for the stamp duty. So that would bring us to the end of all the paperwork involved. To summarize, the paperwork that you need is actually the letter of intent, the tenancy agreement, and then after the tenancy agreement, you have the checklist for the immigration and the Women's Charter, the Annex A that I was talking about, and then you have your stamp certificate, and of course you do have another component called AML checks. Now this is the anti-money laundering check, and this is only required, you are only required to sign this if you have an agent representing you. If not, you don't have to do the AML check. So these are the typical documents involved in a normal tenancy agreement. And of course, you may find this a bit overwhelming if it's your first time renting, because honestly, if you had to go through all the different clauses in the tenancy agreement, it might be a bit overwhelming. You may overlook some things because it is your first time. So of course, when in doubt, you may always hire an agent to represent you. Of course, hire a licensed agent to represent you. And of course, the pros of that would be that this process will be streamlined for you. And on top of that, most of the agents will actually accompany you for your handover day. And on handover day, you will be going through the inventory list with the representative of the apartment, and at the same time you would have to go through all the defects of the apartment, and within your 30 days of stay, make sure you take note of all the defects that are present, because after 30 days, everything that falls under minor repairs will be your responsibility. So that's that's the advantage of having an agent, of course. Everything will be streamlined, and of course, because currently we are in a market where the rents are moving really fast, So if you have somebody on the ground that is familiar with the pattern of the rentals in certain condos, for example, they could actually help you secure a unit much faster than you doing it by yourself. Of course, if you decide not to engage an agent and you would like to try this on by yourself, by all means go ahead. You could go through all the documents. You know, if you have any questions, maybe you can ask a lawyer if you want to know more about how the tenancy agreement is. But at the same time, you just have to be more mindful in case of things like, just make sure that you go through the due diligence that an agent would do while finding an apartment for you, because you wouldn't want to be caught with all these legal problems after you start renting or regret what you have done. So these are, of course, yeah, you would save on the agent for sure, but then it does come with a certain level of responsibility on your part to make sure that you rent an apartment that is good to go. But by all means, you do you. We are always here to help. So if you have any questions, you can always ask the Janys. We will try our best to help you. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, please leave in the comments below if you would like to see more content on certain topics in real estate, or certain maybe something to do with renting as well. Please leave it in the comment section below. We will take a look and we will definitely add it into our content. And of course, if you are looking for content for specific to handing back, meaning what to expect when you have finished your rental, what to do before returning the unit back to the landlord, do take a look in our description below, because we do have a video on that already on our channel. And I hope this segment was beneficial for you, and thank you for your time to listen to the entire process of how you should go about renting, the paperwork involved for rent. And I'm Sharon from the Janys, and I'll see you on the next episode.